So She Loves Me is now in our fifth year. We have one retail location. At some point we had two locations, but when I found out I was going to have a baby, we closed one. So now we have one brick and mortar, which is a complete challenge in and of itself. But I really got started teaching before there was the shop, before it was even called She Loves Me. So my background is in journalism. I was at National Public Radio when I first graduated, and then I worked at the Washington Post, covering food, lifestyle, not quite the hard-hitting, politics that the paper is known for, but I really gravitated towards more lifestyle coverage, local restaurants. So I was doing some light restaurant reviews, and it was a wonderful job. I really enjoyed it. And then I got very interested in plants. Now there's plants you go to Trader Joe's, you go to Home Depot, there's plants everywhere. But this was years ago when succulents were still really novel, and I fell in love with that type of plant and just started teaching after work. So it was as simple as, wanting to learn myself and sharing mistakes that I'd learned with others. So through my classes, I would come home after work, I would have a sold out class. The weekends I would have a sold out class because it just grew. Like, people were really interested in plants at the time. Again, now they're everywhere, but I think I hit a sweet spot. Just friends, and then they would tell friends, and then they would tell friends, and I would just have strangers coming and going. This is before I lived with Jody, by the way,
You
Amanda.
do it online? Did you do it online?
I sold them online, but they met in person. But they would come to my house on my dining room table, and we would just host classes. And then it just very naturally evolved, like, oh, do you do weddings? Can you do flowers? And ever the entrepreneur, I said, yes. I have no idea. I have no experience with that, but yes, I can do it. um,
And
and
where were you located?
this was in DC. This was in my apartment in DC. And something I did that I think helped me eventually make the leap to entrepreneurship full time is I very quickly realized that I was earning money from this. And what I did is I set up a separate bank account just immediately. And every single penny I earned from classes and from plants and from flowers, I kept aside. And I told myself, when I hit a certain point, I'm going to quit my job. So it was a very calculated, at the time, it felt very risky as well, especially leaving behind a career in journalism, which I'd, worked very hard to get. But, growing up, my mom was a seamstress. She was a realtor. She was an accountant. I watched her put on all these different hats and just flourish at everything she did. And I think it kind of gave me the the energy to think that, I can do multiple things.
What was that target amount?
It was 20,000.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I hustled, man. I was like, I joked that I would show up to work like covered in dirt because before I got to my desk, I'd been at Home Depot picking up soil. Like, my Uber ratings were terrible because I was just like schlepping rocks and dirt all over town. Like, I don't miss the hustle for sure. I don't necessarily like to like evangelize the hustle either. I think there's something about balance, but at that time I had a lot of energy and I was really passionate about it. So being in the restaurant scene, covering restaurant openings, closings, I got to know quite a bit of chefs and other small business owners who, had very strong connections in DC. And one approached me about a space that he found. And he said, listen, it won't really work for my pizza shop, but we're going to open our shop right across the street. I think it'd be really great for the neighborhood if there was a flower shop, because I'm sure Lizzie can attest to this, but everybody wants like a confectionery, a flower store, like all these special, really, sweet additions to a neighborhood. It creates a really nice blend. So I think, you know, it benefited him to have me there. It benefited the neighborhood, and of course, I benefited from having access to a space that I never would have sought out myself. I was just fine doing it in my house. Ask my roommate at the time; she probably has a different story, but I think again another quality that most entrepreneurs have is they just leap. They have an opportunity and they leap. They just, who knows the next time this is going to come around. I'm going to say yes to this and see how it goes. Yeah, so ever the journalist, I just researched. I did a ton of research. I would just drive around, if I heard that there was like a wholesaler or a market, I would just get in my car and go check it out. I'm very stubborn and that I won't always take advice or like ask people for help, which I'm working on. But I really did enjoy just kind of like hitting the ground and doing a lot of my own research. I did freelance with one other florist to kind of help me understand more of the technical side of things. But I think I mentioned my mom was a seamstress. So growing up, I every day was like gluing rhinestones on a bodice or ripping seams apart, taking things apart, putting them back together. So I've always been very tactile and had a knack for figuring things out. Of course, I look back at my designs now and I'm like, oh my God, these are horrible. But I had the confidence and I'm still learning. Even now, even today, I look at how like moss kind of just grows
But
wherever, like
I've never seen this in a business plan before.
oh yeah, no, I never had a business plan. I don't necessarily recommend this, but I think, you know, just very aggressively pursuing my passion. I think a lot of times starting a business, it's like, when you're learning a new board game, somebody's explaining to you like, oh, you roll the dice and then this happens. And then after a certain point, you're like, all right, let's just play. Let's just like jump in and get the game going and I'll figure it out. And I think that was kind of the mentality I had towards starting my business.
Now, at some point, you decide to go into retail, and it's like mixing oil and water. Now you got rent, you got taxes, you got personnel you got to hire, you got hours you got to keep, you got
Yes,
security. Going with your other business, which is operating with no rules.
exactly. Okay, it's like you were there.
How do
It's
you
like
split your time? We've heard this story, by the way, about probably 3,000 times.
oh my gosh. And I remember being on the phone with Hartford, like getting workers' compensation insurance and being like, I'm just a florist, and then after I said it so many times, I'm like, okay, I'm not just a florist anymore. Like I have to understand what these policies are, what's legally required of me. And something just shifted. I just remember on the phone with everybody, I'm just a florist. Um, so yeah, that was a really hard time because I am a florist, I am an artist. So kind of having to toggle between and figure out all those more administrative things, but you know, got it done. Just it's like divide and conquer, today, what are we doing? What do we have to get done?
How big a geographic area is your customer base come from?
So this is funny. We before the pandemic, we never offered deliveries. We just operated out of our little flower shop. We like hid it on the website. Like you could place an order for delivery, but it was hidden because every time it came across our plate, I was like, shit, like who's gonna drop this off? Like we don't have a car. Like I don't know where this is. So we made it really hard for people to order. Actually, we did mostly, to your point, weddings, workshops still. But then as soon as the pandemic hit, we had to immediately switch. And I'm sure this is a story that you've heard from multiple entrepreneurs as well, small business owners. But yeah, overnight we just had to start offering deliveries. So today our radius is 7 miles.
Okay.
But we did a wedding in New Orleans last year. We're doing one in Tennessee later this year. So, have flowers will travel.
You somehow have a baby, and that just complicated the picture by 200%.
Oh my gosh. Yes, but owning a business has been such a good practice for becoming a mother because everything is my fault. I'm just used to like people blaming me for things. It's just I think it's part of being an owner, being a leader is taking full responsibility. If somebody messed up, I'm like, okay, well, I didn't make it clear enough. If someone delivered it to the wrong address, I'm like, all right, well, the instructions weren't, direct enough. I really do take a lot of ownership of things that happen within my company, even if they're not directly my faults. And again, I do think that's good practice for for motherhood. So, this is our fifth year in business, and I think I saw some statistic. I don't want to butcher it, but like a high percentage of businesses close after 5 years. They kind of like run out of steam. The tape holding everything together starts to like get really shaky as you grow and scale. So the last year in particular, I worked really hard to create systems. and this is like very unsexy, very like uninteresting part of running a business, but like standard operating procedures, you know, so that if someone is sick, I could just hand them a booklet, you know, a replacement. I could just hand that person a booklet and they can make a bouquet. So that has been a big focus of mine, is creating these, you know, standards. It wasn't fun. Again, like the artist brain of mine, like I fought it, I kicked and screamed, I didn't want to do it, but I also knew it was the way to my freedom. You know, otherwise I would have to come in and show you how to make a bouquet, and this is how you tie a bow, and this is how you place an order. So I really invested a lot of that. And then in terms of what's next, you know, my husband is Portuguese, he's from Europe, and I think we want to move to Europe at some point. So
Wow.
yeah, I'm looking at either like selling the business perhaps. And again, that was another big part of these standard operating procedures. I knew that that would help, you know, if I ever wanted to sell the company, or, you know, have it some sort of spin-off in Europe. I'm not interested in running it from afar. That I know for sure. No, it's just me. I'm the sole owner, sole founder, no partners, and was able to build it from that initial 20,000 that I set aside. And
We've
and
we've
last year we had over $1 million in sales, which I think was a pretty,
uh,
when people apply for a job and they say they love flowers, I'm like, give me 1 week and you will look at them in a completely different way. You can't be in this because you love flowers. Um, in terms of starting a business, you know, learning from your mistakes. I know that's very simple, but in the beginning, I lost sleep. You know, it would be like one customer emailed about a dead rose, and I would just like, you know, unravel. And I think I've gotten really good at just accepting the mistake and learning from it. Like the time between hearing about the mistake and learning from it has gotten shorter and shorter for me. Taken a lot of work. Um, but you know, and I say the same thing to my staff. Look, we made a mistake. How can we learn from it? Let's keep moving, because they as well, you know, they don't want to mess up. And you know, when you mess up too in this business, it's somebody's wedding, you know, it's somebody's
oh yeah.
bereavement bouquet. It's like very emotional work, flowers. So, you know, it is easy to take it really personally, but I work really hard not to.